Hi, I'm about to tell you why I quit Final Fantasy XIV. Kind of. So, Final Fantasy XIV is one of the fastest growing MMOs right now. With a stupid amount of players in Limsa Lominsa, I can't even see my screen anymore. It's known for its rich narrative, which for the most part is the game's main selling point. However, there's some parts of the narrative that aren't as strong or as exciting. Though these are by no means terrible, they really stand out due to the quality of the narrative at its best. I played Stormblood and quit halfway through it, and I want to talk to you about why I had such a hard time with this expansion. Stormblood is essentially a massive war for the liberation of Alamigo from the Garlean Empire. Okay, but I'm sure you know what Stormblood is by now if you're watching this video, so let's get to why you're really here. What's the issues? Well, we have to look at the characters involved throughout most of the prior story. Lise is known as Ida before it was revealed that she was pretending to be her dead sister for reasons. Not creepy at all. You would think that this reveal from Lise is good character development, but no, it's not. This is just taking one character and changing their identity. It's a swap for the original Ida. Ida was known for being from Alamigo, and it meant a lot to her and Papalymo, who also wanted to see it liberated. I don't see why this twist needed to happen, as the story would have still had the same outcome with Lise or Ida being the main character. Honestly, it's just a name change if you really look into it deeply. So, it just makes things more complicated than they had to be. But that's another issue that Stormblood has. You see, the original Ida is the one that fought for the liberation of Alamigo. That Ida is the one who had a deep connection to it. It seems more like Lise is out for revenge, and it shows with her aggressive attitude and eagerness to throw herself at the Imperials whenever given the opportunity. This makes sense. I mean, if I lost a relative to the Imperials, I would be the exact same. But she doesn't seem to grow or develop from this. She stays on course for revenge the whole time. It's not like Alphinaud, who with the Braves had to learn not to be so rash and had to become a patient thinker during Heavensward to not repeat his past mistakes, becoming a completely new and better person. Here it's a hothead Lise who really doesn't change and is mainly failing upwards throughout the whole story. One could question if she does anything at all other than give her really long drawn out speeches. What doesn't help is when most of the meaningful steps to victory are being created by the people around her. Papalymo, who died prior to this expansion, is barely mentioned by her, and that's something I find quite odd. She doesn't even seem to be sad about it. When Moonbreeder was killed off, her death had so much weight, and it still carried on to the actions of the Scions, even all the way up until this expansion. But Papalymo wasn't used as a tool for development for Lise at all. I'm not saying she's a bad character, as I find her relatable, but there's just none of the character development here that I was expecting, especially with the events prior to this expansion. Her becoming the leader of the Resistance makes little to no sense either. Just because her father was, doesn't mean she should have taken the role. It would have been more suited to Raban, who I feel was robbed with this expansion, as in the prior story he was often portrayed as the one character most driven for the liberation of Alamigo, and often brought it up to remind the Warrior of Light of his homeland that he once lost. He also had a strong connection with Curtis, or Lisa's father, who was the previous leader of the Resistance before Conrad took his place. I feel like Raban should have and could have had a better role in Stormblood due to all this backstory and build-up, but it was all wasted on Lise. Okay, so I don't like how Lise was used, but why did I quit? Well, this next part is a massive reason why I dropped the game briefly. I stopped playing Final Fantasy XIV for about 5 months because of Doma. I have to admit, it is the stronger part of the story for me, with an interesting world setting, compelling villains, and heroes in Yotsuyu and Hien. However, there's a massive disconnect that exists between Doma and the Alamigo storylines. Yes, both countries want liberation from the Imperials, but why did we spend so much time here and not with the characters who were ultimately more important? I put the game down around this point because we had just met Xenos, who was incredibly menacing, and we already had an objective in getting the Resistance back together, but we were thrown into what felt like a drawn out side quest, as it didn't have any connections to the original plot aside from sharing its antagonist. The setup with Xenos, the traitors, and the defeated Resistance is all I could think about whilst playing the game at the time, and with how drawn out the Doma plot was becoming, I quickly became frustrated as I wasn't invested in this story as much as the original one. So I felt as though I was forcing myself to play and simply took a step back. 5 months later, I tried to play despite the huge disconnect in the story and slowly found myself enjoying the Doma plot a bit more. Doma's liberation eats up a massive portion of the expansion, and it does feel like its own complete narrative. I almost completely forgot that the Resistance even existed until I was reminded that the war isn't over yet. I seriously thought that the credits would have rolled by the end of the Doma plot. We had characters sacrificing themselves, we defeated a main villain, it felt like the Stormblood we were meant to have with the Alamegans, and it was excellent. So when we did finally return to the Resistance, what happened next truly annoyed me. It turns out the entire time you were off ending civil conflicts in the Azir Steppe and reigniting hope in the people of Yangxia to build up to you taking down your 2 and liberating Doma, the Resistance had done nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. Moving on. Xenos is by far the coolest part of the expansion for me, as he is the exact type of villain I enjoy, who just loves the thrill of the fight, but when that's his entire arc, it's a problem. Everything in the final act of the expansion is due to Xenos being super eager to fight the Warrior of Light, so this basically brings into question were all our victories earned, or was it because Xenos wanted to fight the Warrior of Light? We won in the end, but this makes the storyline seem a bit iffy to me, and I didn't like that aspect. As even till now I'm a bit unsure if the Resistance actually made all their progress themselves, or was it because Xenos wanted us to face him so he could use the hunt and become our friend? What was even happening here? It was really messy. So much happened in such a short amount of time, and I think that's Stormblood's final and most obvious problem: pacing. Fleshing out the wrong parts of its narrative and compressing the important parts, leading to many story disconnects and ultimately a final act that felt less impactful than intended. Well, Stormblood is still Final Fantasy XIV, which is still amazing and has a great OST as usual to come with it. It had a lot of things I just didn't agree with, but it's still an amazing addition to the overall narrative and is really building my hype levels up for Shadowbringers and Endwalker, which is becoming more and more exciting as I play and experience this narrative. Please don't let my judgment of this expansion affect how you feel, as if you liked it, then good for you. And if you want to see how I felt about A Realm Reborn, click here, and I'll see you all